All right. Hello, hello. Happy New Year. I am live, going live here on Unwrapped. I'm Sari Kimbell. I'm the creator of Food Business Success, and I help people start and grow their packaged food business to be something that is profitable, to be something that you actually enjoy doing, and you step into being a true entrepreneur. So, today I wanted to talk to you about getting ready for trade shows. And if you're brand new to this CPG industry, which is what you're in, if you are starting a packaged food or you're doing a body care product or even like pet treats, pet supplements, I've worked with everybody in those areas. So, um, trade shows are one of these things that are typically industry focused. However, they could be like general, like packaging trade show, or I've seen ingredient trade shows. So oftentimes they're like very narrow, like food. And I'll talk about a couple of food ones here. But so usually they're very narrow focused, like, sometimes there's, like might even be, like, keto or certain kind of diet, plant-based, and then sometimes they're a little bit more broad, but related to the CPG industry. And so the kind of trade shows I'm talking about are the ones that are usually private, they're closed, they're not open to the public, you're not really doing sales. There are shows where you might be going and doing actual sales. It's like a public show, but a trade show is very industry specific and usually closed to the public. So I highly recommend, as a new business, if you're in your first couple of years, and especially if you're wanting to do grocery or Amazon or be a larger brand, that you go and walk some shows. So you're an attendee. You don't have a booth, but you go and you walk the show. And the shows that so there's a couple big shows for packaged food. The biggest one is Expo West. And then they also have an Expo East in the East Coast. I think it's in Boston. I've never been to that one. But those are kind of the two biggest ones. They're both put on by New Hope Network. And then there's the Fancy Food Show. So there's a Fancy Food in January, which I'm going to here in next week, or it's coming up quick. But there's one in January in Las Vegas, and then there's a Fancy Food in the summer, usually in New York. I think it's around June. Sometimes they change those times, but those I love Fancy Food as like an intro. Expo West, Expo East are huge, absolutely so big, and it can be really overwhelming. Like, fancy food is already overwhelming, and then, multiply that by, like, by 10. So, when you're just starting out and you're like, "Oh my gosh," like, it can be pretty overwhelming. So, I like those. You can also look for other trade shows. We used to have one here in Colorado called Eat Colorado that was, um very similar, but just much smaller, right? And I have a client who's doing, her state has one that she's doing this spring. So look for smaller regional ones as well. That could be a really nice intro and maybe a place you'd actually want to have a booth to start with. But if you're going to walk a show like Fancy Food, what you want to do is you're going to need to register, and they usually have early bird deadlines, and just get on like specialty food associations lists so you know when those are coming out. And then you'll just register as an attendee, and you'll go through and answer the questions and put yourself in the right categories and all the things. And oftentimes you have to prove that you are in the business, right? And people are like, "Oh my gosh, what do I do?" So if you have a business card, that works, right? That you can take an image, a screenshot of. That's usually all that they need. But just something with your name that is associated with your business and that they can say, "Oh, you are in the food industry." And then, right after you register, you usually have, they'll send you some options for discounted hotels. These shows are big and they fill up, like hotels fill up, and it can be very expensive when there's big trade shows in town, right? So go ahead and just book your hotel right away. because, you can always make modifications. You can always if you had to cancel, you can. But, fancy food's very reasonable. It was, I think, 149 with the early bird, 249, I think, for after the early bird, and then, of course, you gotta book your hotel and get that, and then book your flights. Now, for me, I just go for about a day and a half. I don't need to go for a lot of times these are 3 days or more, so I don't need to go for the whole time, so consider that as far as, like, your budget and the timing of it. So then after you do that, you'll start getting emails about, what to do during this event and different events within the event. So you want to just kind of look over the map, kind of get situated and where you want to go and what things are important to you, and then also review their event schedule because there might be speakers that you want to go see. There could be award presentations that could be cool. Um, they just have various sometimes, like, fancy food does have, like, a makers series, an educational event that's extra, but that's something that might be really, really useful for you. So then you're gonna, go to the event, and here's what you do if you're gonna walk the event, is you wanna go ahead, and you're just walking around, right? You're like saying hello. You're gonna have your badge with your name and everything on it, and it's going to probably have a color designation. It's gonna say like attendee. Now, remember that people are there as vendors to meet buyers, right? So many of them are going to be very kind and love to chat, but be very mindful of their time. They are there to meet buyers, not to talk to you. And so it's always fun to like say hello and ask a little bit about them, try their samples. But just be very mindful of the time that you're taking up and the questions that you're asking. So, you're not asking for like, how do I start a food business or how do I get a distributor? Like, that's not what they're there. They're paying good money to get access to that. I always love taking sales materials with me when I'm inspired. I'm like, ooh, I love the way they did their sell sheet, or I like this postcard, or things like that. So you can definitely take things with you, take samples with you, and you can always take photos too. If you think that this is something that you might do in the future to be a vendor, or it could even just inspire your farmer's market booth. But take photos of things that you're like, oh, I like the way that they did that, or I like this banner, or things like that, right? And then people always ask me, like, should I bring samples if I'm just walking the show? And yes, my answer is always yes. I think that you should have your own sell sheets and your own samples and just have a bag with you. You're going to get a swag bag when you check in. So you can put them in there, but you do wanna have them on you because you just never know who you're gonna meet. You're at a booth and you end up chatting with somebody and they're a buyer for some little store and they're interested, right? And so you always wanna be prepared. There's the saying that luck is where opportunity and preparation meet. So you're prepared, and then if the opportunity comes up, then you're like, "I was so lucky." Right? So you never know who you're gonna meet. If please reach out. Perhaps I'm going to the show and we could always connect. And perhaps there's somebody that I can introduce you to, right? So you just never know who you might meet. And the other thing that I like to do is oftentimes there are like packaging people and ingredients people. So always good idea to go and find those people who are at the shows that they all have their own booths. Because sometimes we can really solve some of our ingredient issues and our packaging issues through that. So those are kind of some of the things that I would recommend as you walk. Um, I learned this. So I take a group of clients and members to Fancy Food the last 2 years. I'll be taking a group this year. And oftentimes, what comes up is some feelings of overwhelm, of competition, and sometimes a little bit of despair. Like, "Oh my gosh, there's like a million hot sauces here, and I have a hot sauce. Like, how on earth am I ever gonna make it?" Right? When there's so much competition or that like compare and despair, like they're so much further along than I am. And I wanna just first of all, warn you that that could happen and that that's perfectly normal, perfectly natural, and, like, it's not a zero-sum game. Like, you can be successful and they can be successful. And I always recommend, like, introducing yourself, telling people, like, "Hey, I'm a small hot sauce brand, and I love what you're doing." Like, people love it when they, a little bit of ego, stroking their ego a little bit. So, tell them how much you love their product or their marketing or something very specific and and get their card. So it might not be appropriate to talk then, but they may be willing to give you some time later on. Like everybody has needed help from somebody in this industry. This industry I find is very supportive and we're all kind of in it together to raise the level of food and, get out of, like, kind of the big factory, like, large scale made the food industry complex, and so I find that people are pretty, generous with their time and want to make connections, and they were helped by people along the way. So do not despair. Just take this as an opportunity to learn and realize like you may have some things that you need to work on and come back and like up level, but it's so cool that you get to see it and what it really looks like, right? And see it in action. Do take business cards as you meet people. And then what you want to do is you should really have your LinkedIn profile already dialed in. And I have a great podcast episode from the summer of 2022 with Lee Coles. And we talk about your LinkedIn profile. So go have a listen or watch it here on YouTube. Um, but your LinkedIn profile should already be looking pretty good. And then you want to connect with people on LinkedIn and remind them that you met them at Fancy Food. So you could do it like that night or during the weekend so that it's fresh for them. And then you also want to send follow up emails for people, um, just kind of reminding, saying hello, thanks for their time. It was really nice to meet you. And if it's a buyer, then there's definitely a protocol for following up there. But one thing I do recommend is you don't do it right away. Think about like people are going to come home from the show on like Tuesday. Maybe they get home and they're exhausted, and then the weekend. And so I would really wait until the following week to send those emails because otherwise, I mean, their inbox is going to be really, really full. So that's what you do when you're walking the show and just be really open, like whatever comes up, just be curious. It's fun, right? You're just walking and talking and you're going to eat a lot of strange foods. Do pace yourself. Don't eat everything. Your stomach will get a little bit gurgly if you are eating every single random sample and you have a lot of things in your stomach. So, to be a little bit mindful about the different foods that you say yes to, because there's a lot of them. All right. So then you walk the show. I highly recommend you do this at least once before you ever sign up as a vendor for a larger show. If you wanna go ahead and go to, like, some smaller regional shows, absolutely, but these shows, like Fancy Food and, expos, are very costly. They are a big investment of time and money, and I really want you to go ahead of time and see, like, what is this all about? And to really understand, like, what is your goal? I mean, a trade show is really for people who want to be in wholesale for the most part. It's not so much about if you're only online. So it's really about getting into wholesale, but there are so many opportunities in wholesale. One of my clients who had a booth at Fancy Food one year, she was approached by a cruise line, right? Like there are lots of places besides a grocery store that do buy this kind of food and do buy wholesale. So it could be gift shops. It could be, very small all the way up to very large stores. It could be, like I said, cruise ships or other kinds of even hotels and things like that. So there's lots of different kinds of buyers there. And then, if you decide that you do want to be a vendor, so things to consider are costs. You're probably looking at least, I would say, like 10K to 30K is kind of like a very minimum. And that's like your booth fee, and then all of the marketing pieces that you need, all the things to set up your booth, all of the products. Like you're probably going to want to have smaller products potentially, or just like you're going to buy a lot of all the packaging, all the ingredients, get the product made, right? Then there's staffing. Now, I've had people who go, like, in a fancy food and they work it themselves. I was there to help relieve relieve my client so she could go to the bathroom and get some food. It's challenging to do it on your own. I don't recommend it. You should have at least one other person, but a lot of times people are bringing a staff here, right? And they're rotating because it's long days. It's like 10 to 4 or, 10 to 5, plus all the setup ahead of time, the 3 days of the show, the breakdown. It's just a lot and a lot of talking and a lot of energy, right? So, imagine like a farmer's market times, more hours and then multiple days in a row. Um, and then, if you're thinking like, yeah, I think I do want to do this, I would really try to talk with some other people or come and work with me and my group of people who have done these kind of shows, right? You want to ask others and don't just assume you can figure it all out on your own. Like I said, that this industry is really tight knit and oftentimes people really want to help each other. So you can follow up with people maybe you meet from walking the show, and then you're like, "Oh, I'm going to ask them like, what did you learn from that? What would you do differently? And I'm thinking about doing a show. Like, would they be willing to give you 15 minutes to talk about it?" And then things to know about, things to ask would be if it's a smaller show, like just understanding who's going to be there. Um, is this for buyers? Is this for the public? Like making sure that this is going to be something that's really going to benefit you and help you reach your goals, your particular goals, right? So will there be direct sales on the floor? Will there be ordering on the floor? And being prepared for that. And then, just all of the logistics about setup. And a lot of times, these places are run by unions, the convention centers. And so there's a lot of extra fees and bureaucracy and all sorts of fun stuff to get these shows off the ground. So once you leave, you will once everything closed down, then you will have a stack of business cards, or a lot of times they're doing them electronically now where you can scan people's badges and it gives you all their information of people you've talked to. And then that's where you want to definitely start doing your email follow-ups. But some amazing, new deals definitely come out of this stuff. And they are very important pieces of this industry of getting into larger stores, growing your store count, um, and getting into just distribution, getting into new states, all of that stuff. So if that's in your radar, then I definitely would recommend going to some smaller trade shows or walking these. So if you happen to be at Fancy Food, definitely DM me on Instagram and let me know, and be really fun to say hello. So hopefully that really answered most of the questions that I get about doing trade shows. And now you'll be more prepared and know what to expect. All right, that's it for me. Please like and subscribe this video. It really helps as people find information as they are starting their own packaged product. It's not just food that this channel is great for. Definitely body care, pets, anything that you're making and putting into a package. That's what we do here, right? And so do consider coming and joining me over in Food Business Success, getting on the mailing list. Like and subscribe, leave a comment down below, and grab the checklist that's down in the description as well. All right, until next time, have an amazing rest of your day.